In the span of a single human lifetime, one beverage has transformed from an obscure Thai tonic into a global phenomenon worth over $20 billion. It didn't just create a product, it created an entire industry. It didn't just sponsor athletes, it created a culture. This is not simply the story of an energy drink. This is the story of how a brilliant Austrian entrepreneur and a strategic Thai businessman turned caffeine and taurine into one of the most recognized brands on planet Earth. Red Bull, two simple words that have become synonymous with energy, adventure, rebellion, and the impossible made possible. But how did we get here? How did a drink that tastes like liquid candy and contains ingredients most people can't pronounce become the third most valuable beverage brand in the world? Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Walk into any convenience store, any supermarket, any gas station from Los Angeles to Lagos, from Tokyo to Toronto, and you'll find it. That distinctive blue and silver can, sometimes alone, often surrounded by imitators, always commanding a premium price. But Red Bull is more than a beverage. It's a media company that produces Emmy-winning documentaries. It's a sports empire that owns soccer teams, Formula One racing teams, and sponsors thousands of athletes across dozens of disciplines. It's a record label, it's a lifestyle brand that has infiltrated music festivals, nightclubs, extreme sports competitions, and college campuses worldwide. The company owns racetracks, stadiums, islands, and even an airborne fleet of vintage aircraft. It has launched people into space, broken world records, and changed the very definition of what a corporation can be. This is the story of vision meeting opportunity, of Eastern tradition colliding with Western marketing genius, of a functional beverage transformed into a cultural phenomenon that transcends its humble origins. Red Bull didn't just disrupt the beverage industry, they rewrote the playbook entirely. They proved that with the right brand identity, the right marketing, and the right cultural positioning, you could charge 3 to 4 times what a Coca-Cola costs and have consumers happily pay that premium. That's extraordinary. Today, Red Bull sells approximately 12 billion cans annually in over 170 countries. But the numbers barely tell the story. Red Bull's true achievement isn't measured in revenue or market share. It's measured in cultural impact, in how it changed our relationship with beverages, with sports, with media, and with the very concept of branding itself. This is a company that turned a can of caffeinated liquid into a passport to adventure, that transformed marketing from interruption into entertainment. That made consumers not just customers, but believers in a lifestyle, a philosophy, a way of seeing the world, from a single factory in Austria to a global empire. From a partnership between two men who barely spoke the same language to a corporate behemoth that employs over 13,000 people worldwide. From an unknown drink to a brand more recognizable than most national flags. This is the story of how Red Bull gave itself wings, and in the process, changed everything. Our journey begins not in the boardrooms of Vienna or the marketing departments of Madison Avenue, but in the bustling streets of Thailand in the 1960s, where a pharmaceutical entrepreneur was about to create something that would eventually conquer the world. But he had no idea. Not yet. Bangkok, 1960s. Thailand is a nation in transition. The Vietnam War rages nearby, bringing American military presence and Western influence. The economy is growing, slowly modernizing from its agricultural roots. The streets pulse with energy, both literal and metaphorical. And it's here, in this moment of transformation, that our story truly begins. The working class of Thailand, truck drivers making long hauls between cities, factory workers pulling double shifts, taxi drivers working through the night, they all faced the same challenge: exhaustion. The human body has limits, but work demands often exceeded those limits. Chaleo Yuvidya was not born into wealth. The son of a fruit trader from the impoverished northeastern region of Thailand, Chaleo understood hard work intimately. After serving as a salesman for a pharmaceutical company, he saw an opportunity. Thailand's workers needed something to combat fatigue, something affordable, something effective. In 1962, Chaleo Yuvidya founded TC Pharmaceutical. His mission was focused: create an energy tonic specifically for Thailand's blue-collar workforce. He formulated his drink with ingredients familiar to Asian medicine: caffeine, taurine, B vitamins, and sugar. The taste was intensely sweet, almost syrupy, designed to provide immediate energy and mask the bitter components. But Chaleo's true genius wasn't in the formulation. Energy tonics existed throughout Asia. His genius was in the branding and marketing strategy he would employ. In 1962, Krating Deng, Red Bull in Thai, was born. The name itself was inspired by the gaur, a large wild bovine native to Southeast Asia, known for its strength and power. The logo featured two red bulls charging at each other in front of a golden sun. Powerful, aggressive, memorable. The drink came in small brown glass bottles, sold for just a few baht, affordable enough for a construction worker or truck driver. Chaleo's target market wasn't fashionable youth or athletes. It was men who worked with their hands and backs, men who needed energy to survive another shift. The marketing was grassroots and tactical. Chaleo focused distribution on truck stops, construction sites, factories, and blue-collar neighborhoods. He advertised on radio programs popular with working-class listeners. The message was straightforward: drink this before your shift, maintain your energy, earn more money, support your family. In Thai culture, the concept of work and perseverance is deeply important. The idea of working hard for family resonates profoundly. Chaleo understood this. Krating Deng wasn't positioned as a luxury or indulgence. It was positioned as a tool, a functional product that helped you fulfill your duties. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Krating Deng grew steadily. Word of mouth among laborers proved more valuable than any advertising campaign. Truck drivers recommended it to each other. Construction foremen provided it to crews during particularly demanding projects. Factory supervisors kept cases stocked for night shift workers. By the late 1970s, Krating Deng had become the dominant energy tonic in Thailand. Chaleo Yuvidya had built a successful business serving an underappreciated market segment. TC Pharmaceutical was profitable. Krating Deng was a household name among Thailand's working class. But Chaleo's ambitions were limited to Thailand. He wasn't thinking globally. He wasn't imagining his product in Western markets or among affluent consumers. He had created something perfectly suited for its time and place, and he was content with that success. What Chalayovidya didn't know, couldn't have known, was that halfway around the world, an Austrian businessman would soon discover his product and see something entirely different. Not a functional tonic for tired workers, but a lifestyle brand for the world. Dietrich Mateschitz was born in 1944 in Sankt Marien im Mürztal, a small town in the Austrian Alps. His upbringing was modest. His parents were both teachers. Nothing about his early life suggested he would become one of the wealthiest people in Europe. Mateschitz took 10 years to complete his university degree in marketing at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. By his own admission, he was not an exceptional student. He was more interested in experiencing life than academic achievement. He traveled, he explored, he questioned conventional paths. Throughout the 1970s, Mateschitz worked in marketing for various consumer goods companies. He was competent but unremarkable. By the early 1980s, he was working for Blendax, a German toothpaste manufacturer, as an international marketing director. His job required extensive travel throughout Asia. It was during these business trips to Asia that Dietrich Mateschitz's life would change forever, and his change would eventually change the global business landscape. 1982. Dietrich Mateschitz arrives in Bangkok on yet another business trip. He's approaching 40 years old. He's successful enough but not wealthy. He's interested in adventure but stuck in corporate routines. He's exhausted from constant travel across time zones. The flight from Europe to Bangkok was brutal, over 12 hours without rest, with a layover, arriving disoriented and tired. Throughout the 1970s, Mateschitz worked in marketing for various consumer goods companies. He was competent but unremarkable. By the early 1980s, he was working for Blendax, a German toothpaste manufacturer, as an international marketing director. His job required extensive travel throughout Asia. It was during these business trips to Asia that Dietrich Mateschitz's life would change forever, and his change would eventually change the global business landscape. 1982. Dietrich Mateschitz arrives in Bangkok on yet another business trip. He's approaching 40 years old. He's successful enough, but not wealthy. He's interested in adventure but stuck in corporate routines. He's exhausted from constant travel across time zones. The flight from Europe to Bangkok was brutal, over 12 hours without rest, with a layover, arriving disoriented and tired. The jet lag was overwhelming. Mateschitz had a full schedule of meetings but could barely keep his eyes open. His body clock was completely disrupted. He needed something, anything, to help him function. The taste was unlike anything available in Europe, incredibly sweet, almost medicinal. But within 30 minutes, Mateschitz felt different, alert, energized. His jet lag hadn't disappeared, but it was manageable. He could think clearly, function normally. The effect was remarkable enough that Mateschitz began asking questions. What was in this drink? Who made it? How widespread was it in Thailand? Was it available elsewhere in Asia? Over the course of that trip, Mateschitz became obsessed. He saw Krating Deng everywhere: construction sites, taxi stands, markets, factories. This wasn't some niche product. Within Thailand's working class, it was a staple, as essential as water or tea. During subsequent trips to Thailand over the next year, an idea began crystallizing in Matashitz's mind, not just importing Krating Daeng to Europe that would fail. The taste was too unfamiliar, the branding too foreign, the market positioning completely wrong for Western consumers. No, Matashitz envisioned something more audacious. Take Krating Daeng's formula as a starting point, adapt it for Western tastes, completely rebrand it. But most importantly, and this was the stroke of genius, change the target market entirely. Instead of targeting tired laborers and truck drivers, Matashitz would target young people, students pulling all-nighters, club-goers dancing until dawn, athletes seeking performance enhancement, professionals needing focus during demanding workdays. The formula wouldn't change dramatically, but everything else would. The meeting between Chaleo Uvidya and Dietrich Mateschitz has become legendary in business circles. Two men from completely different worlds, different ages, different cultures, different business philosophies. One created a functional product for Thailand's working class. The other envisioned a global lifestyle brand. On paper, this partnership shouldn't have worked. The negotiations took time. Charleo was cautious. He'd built a successful business serving Thai workers. Why risk that proven model on an uncertain Western venture? Why partner with this Austrian who had no beverage industry experience and no capital to contribute? But Mateschitz was persuasive. He argued that the Thai market, while profitable, was limited. Western markets offered exponentially greater revenue potential. Chaleo would retain complete control of Krating Daeng in Thailand and Asia. This new venture, which they would call Red Bull, would focus on Europe, America, and eventually the rest of the world. In 1984, the partnership was formalized. The C Pharmaceutical and Dietrich Mateschitz would create a new company, Red Bull GmbH. Chaleo owned 49%, Mateschitz owned 49%. They gave the remaining 2% to Chaleo's son, Chalerm, who would eventually play a significant role in the company's operations. The stage was set. Two men, two cultures, one vision. What happened next would take years of struggle, false starts, and near failure before ultimately succeeding beyond anyone's imagination. Austria, 1984. With the partnership established, Mateschitz faced his first major challenge, adapting Krating Daeng for Western palates and regulatory environments. The original Thai formula wouldn't work unchanged. European food safety regulations were different. Taste preferences were different. Everything needed refinement. Mateschitz spent months working with food scientists to modify the formula. The caffeine content needed adjustment for European regulations. The sweetness, while still high, was reduced slightly. The mouthfeel was changed. Carbonation was added, transforming it from a syrupy tonic into something more like a soft drink. But the core ingredients remained: caffeine for stimulation, taurine for mental performance, B vitamins for energy metabolism, and sugar for quick energy. The taste was still unusual, vaguely fruity, medicinal, intensely sweet. Focus groups hated it. Market research suggested it would fail. Traditional product development wisdom said you needed broad appeal. Your product should taste good to the majority of potential consumers. Red Bull violated that principle completely. Many people found the taste off-putting, but Mateschitz understood something crucial. You don't need everyone to like your product. You need passionate advocates who love it despite, or perhaps because of, its unconventional qualities. Mateschitz' confidence was unwavering, but he had no beverage industry experience, no distribution network, no manufacturing infrastructure, and very limited capital. He'd invested his life savings, approximately $500,000, into this venture. Failure meant personal bankruptcy. If the formula was one half of the equation, the design was the other. Mateschitz knew packaging would be crucial. In the mid-1980s, beverage cans were typically 355 milliliters in the US and 330 milliliters in Europe standard sizes. Mateschitz chose 250 milliliters. Smaller, more concentrated, more premium. The color scheme was carefully chosen. Blue suggested trust, reliability, calmness, ironic for an energy product. Silver added a metallic, modern, almost futuristic feel. The two bulls charging at each other in front of a sun, adapted directly from Kratingdeng's logo, conveyed power and aggression. By 1986, everything was finally ready. The formula was finalized. The can design was complete. Manufacturing arrangements were secured with a small facility in Austria. The initial production run was modest, just enough to test the Austrian market. But one crucial element remained: the slogan. Mateschitz hired a small, unconventional advertising agency to develop Red Bull's brand messaging. The team understood they weren't just selling an energy drink, they were selling transformation, the ability to transcend limitations, to achieve the impossible. Red Bull gives you wings was more than a slogan. It was a promise. Not literal flight, obviously, but metaphorical transcendence. The ability to overcome obstacles, to perform beyond normal capacity, to achieve goals that seemed impossible. It was aspirational, memorable, and perfectly aligned with the brand identity Mateschitz was building. The visual language of Red Bull's advertising was equally distinctive. Instead of slick, expensive live-action commercials, they developed a simple animated style. Stick-figure characters facing challenges, exhaustion, stress, physical limitations. Then, after consuming Red Bull, they literally sprout wings. Simple, memorable, cheap to produce, and perfect for international adaptation since minimal dialogue was required. April 1st, 1987. Red Bull officially launched in Austria. It was no coincidence that the date was April Fool's Day. Mateschitz had a sense of humor about the audacity of what he was attempting, introducing an expensive, strange-tasting energy drink to a market that had no category for such a product. Many thought it was a joke, a gimmick that would disappear quickly. Distribution was the first major hurdle. Traditional beverage distributors wanted nothing to do with Red Bull. The price was too high. The can was too small. The taste was too unusual. Major retailers refused to stock it. So Mateschitz did what would become his signature move. He went around them. Unable to secure traditional distribution, Mateschitz pioneered guerrilla marketing tactics that would eventually become legendary. He hired students to drive old cars, painted with Red Bull branding, to university campuses. They gave away free cans. They targeted exam periods when students were pulling all-nighters. The strategy was counterintuitive. Most companies guarded their profit margins carefully, selling through established channels. Mateschitz gave away massive quantities of product for free. He intentionally created scarcity by limiting distribution. He refused to discount or negotiate on price. The nightclub scene became the second crucial target market. Mateschitz understood that young people dancing for hours needed energy. Red Bull promotional staff infiltrated clubs across Vienna, giving away product, sponsoring events, positioning Red Bull as an essential component of nightlife culture. Extreme sports became the third pillar of Red Bull's early marketing strategy. Mateschitz himself was an avid skier. He understood the culture of adventure sports. He began sponsoring small skiing and snowboarding events. Nothing elaborate or expensive, just presence, visibility, association with active, adventurous lifestyles. But despite the clever marketing, Red Bull was hemorrhaging money. The first year saw minimal sales. The second year showed modest growth, but nowhere near profitability. Mateschitz had burned through his initial capital. He was personally broke. The partnership with Chaleo provided some additional funding, but patience was wearing thin. Salvation came from an unexpected source, the mixing culture. Young people began mixing Red Bull with alcohol, particularly vodka. The caffeine masked alcohol's depressant effects, allowing people to drink longer while maintaining energy. The Red Bull vodka became a phenomenon in European nightlife. This wasn't something Mateschitz had planned or encouraged. It emerged organically, but he was smart enough to recognize and amplify it. Red Bull began explicitly targeting bars and nightclubs with promotional materials, branded glassware, and trained staff. The alcohol synergy, controversial as it would later become, drove massive growth in consumption. By 1989, something remarkable was happening. Red Bull was selling through word of mouth. People who tried it told their friends. Athletes discovered it improved endurance. Students swore by it during exam periods. Clubgoers couldn't imagine nightlife without it. Sales began doubling year over year. The scarcity Mateschitz had created, intentionally limiting distribution channels, actually increased desire. You couldn't buy Red Bull in every supermarket. You had to know where to find it. This exclusivity enhanced its cool factor, particularly among young people who wanted products that felt special and authentic. By 1990, Red Bull was finally approaching profitability in Austria. 3 years of losses, 3 years of doubt, but the foundation was solid. More importantly, Mateschitz had learned invaluable lessons about brand building, guerrilla marketing, and creating cultural movements rather than just selling products. 1992. The Berlin Wall had fallen 3 years earlier. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Eastern Europe was transforming. Mateschitz saw opportunity. Hungary would be Red Bull's first international expansion beyond Austria. The Hungarian launch replicated the Austrian strategy almost exactly. Target universities, infiltrate nightclubs, sponsor extreme sports events, give away massive quantities, build word of mouth, create desire through scarcity. It worked even better than in Austria. Hungary's youth, hungry for Western products and experiences after decades of communism, embraced Red Bull enthusiastically. The brand represented modernity, energy, freedom, everything the new post-communist era promised. Within a year, Hungary became one of Red Bull's strongest markets per capita. Success in Hungary validated the model. If Red Bull could work in Austria and Hungary, it could work anywhere. Mateschitz began planning systematic European expansion: Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom. Each market would follow the same blueprint: guerrilla marketing, student focus, nightlife integration, extreme sports sponsorship. By the mid-1990s, Red Bull Gives You Wings had transcended advertising to become a cultural phrase. People used it in conversations. Comedians referenced it. It appeared in movies and television shows. The slogan had achieved something rare in marketing: genuine cultural penetration. The animated style allowed Red Bull to produce hundreds of commercials cheaply and adapt them instantly to different cultures and languages. The humor was universal. The message was clear. The branding was consistent. While competitors spent millions on celebrity endorsements and elaborate productions, Red Bull spent relatively little and achieved greater impact. By 1995, Red Bull had transformed from a struggling startup to a profitable European phenomenon. Sales were doubling annually. The brand was established in over a dozen countries. Mateschitz's gamble had paid off, but Europe was just the beginning. What Mateschitz had created was revolutionary: a premium-priced product with massive profit margins, sold through unconventional channels, marketed through guerrilla tactics and event sponsorship rather than traditional advertising. Red Bull hadn't just found a niche, it had created an entirely new category: the energy drink. 1995. The global beverage market is mature, consolidated, and dominated by giants: Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestlé, Anheuser-Busch. The categories are well defined: carbonated soft drinks, fruit juices, bottled water, sports drinks, tea, coffee. There is no energy drink category. Red Bull is about to create one. The beverage industry in the mid-1990s was skeptical of Red Bull's model. Too expensive, too small, too niche. Industry analysts predicted Red Bull was a fad that would fade once major beverage companies introduced their own versions. They were about to be spectacularly wrong. 1996. Red Bull sells over 100 million cans. Revenue exceeds $200 million. The company is profitable. More remarkably, it's achieving profit margins exceeding 30%, unheard of in the beverage industry where margins typically range from 5 to 15%. Mateschitz has created something unprecedented: a premium-priced, high-margin beverage with rapidly growing demand. The expansion strategy continued systematically. Each new market followed the proven formula: guerrilla marketing first, traditional distribution later. Build demand from the bottom up through cultural infiltration rather than top-down through advertising. Own the nightlife scene, dominate university campuses, associate with adventure and extreme sports. Germany was Red Bull's most important early expansion market. The largest economy in Europe, sophisticated consumers, intense competition. If Red Bull could succeed in Germany, it could succeed anywhere. Berlin in the 1990s had one of the world's most vibrant nightlife scenes. The legendary techno clubs attracted thousands of young people dancing for 8, 10, 12 hours straight. They needed energy. Red Bull became essential to that culture. Simultaneously, Red Bull targeted German universities with surgical precision. They hired student brand managers, paying them to promote Red Bull on campus, organize events, distribute samples. These weren't traditional employees. They were authentic members of the target demographic who genuinely believed in the product. By 1996, German retailers who had initially refused to stock Red Bull were begging for inventory. The grassroots demand was undeniable. Students asked for it. Clubgoers demanded it. Athletes wanted it. Retailers had to stock it or lose sales to competitors who did. This was Mateschitz' genius playing out perfectly. By building demand before supply, he created a pull-through distribution model where retailers came to him rather than him begging retailers for shelf space. Red Bull could dictate terms, maintain premium pricing, and control its brand presentation. This was Mateschitz' genius playing out perfectly. By building demand before supply, he created a pull-through distribution model where retailers came to him rather than him begging retailers for shelf space. Red Bull could dictate terms, maintain premium pricing, and control its brand presentation. The United Kingdom presented unique challenges. The market was sophisticated, skeptical of foreign brands, and already crowded with energy stimulant products like Lucozade. British consumers were notoriously difficult to impress with continental European brands. Red Bull entered the UK through London's nightclub scene first. The strategy was familiar: infiltrate clubs, give away product, become essential to the experience. But the UK required additional tactics. Red Bull needed British credibility. Extreme sports provided the authenticity. Red Bull began sponsoring British skateboarders, BMX riders, and snowboarders, not established stars, but emerging talent, athletes who genuinely used the product and believed in it. The grassroots approach built credibility that traditional advertising never could. British universities became another battleground. Red Bull sponsored everything from study groups to rowing teams to student club events. The branded Mini Cooper's small cars with giant Red Bull cans mounted on top became iconic sights on British campuses. As Red Bull's popularity exploded, scrutiny of its ingredients intensified. Taurine, caffeine, B vitamins, sugar. What were these substances? Were they safe? The debates became intense and sometimes absurd. Urban legends spread. Taurine was extracted from bull testicles, completely false. Red Bull was dangerous based on no scientific evidence. Mixing it with alcohol was deadly, exaggerated, and misleading. The controversies created free publicity and actually enhanced Red Bull's rebellious, edgy image. Multiple European countries initially banned or attempted to ban Red Bull. France and Denmark prohibited it for years. Germany's regulatory bodies scrutinized it intensely. Each controversy generated massive media coverage. Mateschitz fought every battle, ultimately prevailing through scientific evidence demonstrating safety. The bans ultimately failed. Consumer demand was too strong. Scientific evidence supported safety. And ironically, the prohibitions made Red Bull more desirable. Forbidden fruit always tastes sweeter. When France finally legalized Red Bull in 2008, demand exploded immediately. By the late 1990s, Red Bull's success was impossible to ignore. The major beverage companies, initially dismissive, now saw a massive opportunity, an entirely new category with high margins and growing demand. They wanted in. The copycats emerged rapidly. Hanson Natural Corporation introduced Monster Energy in 2002. Coca-Cola launched multiple energy brands including Full Throttle and Tab Energy. PepsiCo introduced AMP and later acquired Rockstar. Dozens of smaller companies launched regional energy drinks. The energy drink category exploded. The energy drink category that Red Bull created became one of the fastest growing segments in the entire beverage industry. From essentially zero in 1995 to over $5 billion globally by 2005. Red Bull maintained market leadership, but competitors were capturing significant share of the expanding market. Mateshitz's response to competition was remarkable in its confidence. Red Bull didn't drop prices, didn't introduce larger sizes, didn't flood the market with product variations. Instead, Red Bull doubled down on what made it different: cultural relevance, extreme sports sponsorship, grassroots marketing, and premium positioning. While competitors slapped logos on athletes' helmets and called it sponsorship, Red Bull was building entire careers. They didn't just sponsor events, they created them. They didn't just advertise to consumers, they entertained them. The gap between Red Bull and its competitors wasn't closing, it was widening. By 2010, the energy drink category Red Bull created had become a permanent fixture of global consumer culture. Annual sales exceeded $25 billion worldwide. Over 500 different energy drink brands existed globally. The category was still growing at double-digit rates annually. Red Bull maintained approximately 40% of global market share, extraordinary for the company that created the category. But more impressive was Red Bull's profit margin, estimated at 25 to 30%, far exceeding the 5 to 10% margins competitors achieved. Red Bull was the most valuable brand in the category it invented. The explosive growth of energy drinks brought unintended consequences. Emergency room visits related to energy drink consumption increased. Mixing energy drinks with alcohol became controversial. Deaths were attributed often incorrectly to energy drink consumption. The industry Red Bull created faced growing scrutiny. Regulatory attention intensified. Some countries restricted energy drink sales to minors. Warning labels became mandatory in many jurisdictions. Marketing restrictions were imposed. The industry Red Bull created was being forced to mature and accept responsibility. Today, energy drinks are a mature, accepted category of the global beverage industry. Over $60 billion in annual sales worldwide, available in virtually every country, consumed by hundreds of millions of people. Red Bull created an industry that permanently changed how people consume caffeine and approach energy supplementation. But while Red Bull created the category, its true achievement was something even more remarkable: transforming itself from a beverage company into a media and entertainment empire. That transformation, driven by extreme sports and revolutionary marketing, would define the next chapter of the Red Bull story. By the late 1990s, Red Bull had established itself as a successful beverage company. Sales were strong, distribution was expanding, profits were healthy. Most companies would have been satisfied. Most CEOs would have focused on protecting market share and maximizing quarterly returns. Dietrich Mateschitz was not most CEOs. This wasn't marketing speak. Mateschitz genuinely believed Red Bull should transcend traditional corporate boundaries. He envisioned Red Bull as a content creator, an event organizer, a sports team owner, a media empire, all centered around adventure, performance, and pushing human limits. Red Bull's involvement in extreme sports began modestly in the early 1990s. Small sponsorships of individual athletes, support for local competitions, presence at skateboard parks and snowboard slopes. The approach was grassroots, authentic, relationship-driven. This approach was radically different from traditional sports sponsorship. Nike and Adidas signed multi-million-dollar contracts with established stars demanding extensive brand exposure. Red Bull invested small amounts in emerging talent, asking for nothing except authentic advocacy. The athletes weren't billboards, they were partners. By the mid-1990s, Red Bull was sponsoring dozens of athletes across multiple disciplines: snowboarding, skateboarding, BMX, surfing, motocross, mountain biking. These weren't mainstream sports. They were counterculture activities, often dismissed by established sports media as juvenile or dangerous. Mateschitz saw them as the future. In 1992, Red Bull organized its first major event, Flugtag, German for Flight Day. The concept was brilliantly simple and utterly absurd. Teams would build human-powered flying machines from everyday materials. They would launch these contraptions from a 30-foot-high platform into a river or lake. Whoever flew the farthest won. Most machines immediately plummeted into the water. Flugtag was genius marketing disguised as entertainment. It cost relatively little to organize. It generated massive crowds. The first Vienna Flugtag attracted thousands of spectators. It created amazing visual content. Flying machines crashing into water is inherently hilarious and shareable, and it perfectly embodied Red Bull's philosophy, attempting the impossible, embracing failure, having fun. The success of the first Flugtag proved Mateschkitz's thesis. Red Bull could create events that attracted massive audiences, generated media coverage far exceeding any advertising budget, and associated the brand with creativity, humor, and adventure. Flugtag expanded internationally: Germany, Switzerland, the UK, eventually the United States. By the 2000s, Flugtag had become a global phenomenon. Events attracted crowds exceeding 100,000 people. Millions watched online videos. The media coverage was extraordinary. Local news stations couldn't resist covering flying machines crashing into rivers. And every image, every video, every news segment prominently featured Red Bull branding. In 2003, Red Bull launched the Red Bull Air Race World Championship. Unlike Flugtag's amateur comedy, air racing was deadly serious. Professional pilots flying high-performance aircraft through technical courses at speeds exceeding 250 miles per hour, pulling extreme G-forces, competing for world championship titles. The Red Bull Air Race represented a massive escalation in both ambition and investment. Organizing international air races required sophisticated logistics, extensive safety measures, coordination with aviation authorities, and significant capital. But the visual spectacle and competitive drama were unmatched. Red Bull wasn't just sponsoring the air race, they owned it completely, organized it, funded it, controlled the television rights. This was Matyszytz's vision in action. Red Bull as media company and event organizer, not just product manufacturer. The air race broadcasts reached over 200 million viewers across multiple continents. The imagery was stunning: aircraft racing above cities like Budapest, Abu Dhabi, San Diego. The brand integration was total, but not overbearing. Red Bull had created compelling sporting content that audiences wanted to watch. 2004. Red Bull made a move that shocked the motorsports world, purchasing the struggling Jaguar Formula One team for approximately $1. Yes, $1. Of course, Red Bull also assumed the team's substantial debts and committed to massive ongoing investment. But the nominal purchase price revealed how desperate Jaguar was to exit Formula One. Red Bull Racing was born. The team would compete in Formula One, the pinnacle of motorsport, against manufacturers like Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes with decades of heritage and billions of dollars invested. Industry insiders were skeptical. A beverage company trying to compete in Formula One. It seemed absurd. The first years were difficult. Red Bull Racing struggled to compete with established teams. Technical challenges, strategic mistakes, mechanical failures. But Mateschitz remained committed. He hired Adrian Newey, arguably the greatest Formula One car designer in history. He invested in facilities, technology, personnel. He was building for long-term dominance, not short-term results. 2009. Red Bull Racing achieved its first Formula One victory with Sebastian Vettel in China. The breakthrough moment. The team that everyone had dismissed was now winning races, and they were just getting started. From 2010 to 2013, Red Bull Racing dominated Formula One. 4 consecutive Constructors' Championships. Sebastian Vettel won 4 consecutive Drivers' Championships. The beverage company had become the team to beat in the world's most prestigious motorsport series. The impossible had become reality. Formula One was just the beginning. In 2009, Red Bull purchased SSV Markranstädt, a 5th Division German football club, relocated it to Leipzig, and created RB Leipzig. The move was controversial. German football culture despises corporate ownership. Red Bull faced fierce opposition, protests, and accusations of commercializing the sport. But Mateschitz persisted. RB Leipzig climbed through the German football divisions rapidly, achieving promotion to the Bundesliga, Germany's top division, by 2016. The investments were massive. State-of-the-art facilities, top coaching, talented players. Red Bull was building a championship-caliber team from essentially nothing. In North America, Red Bull acquired the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars in 2006, rebranding them as the New York Red Bulls. They built a new stadium, recruited international stars like Thierry Henry and Rafa Marquez, and elevated the team's profile significantly. Red Bull's sports team acquisitions expanded globally. FC Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, Red Bull Brazil, Red Bull Ghana, a NASCAR team, ice hockey teams. This wasn't sponsorship. This was ownership. Red Bull controlled these teams completely, integrated them into a global talent development system, and used them as content generation engines. Beyond teams, Red Bull cultivated individual athletes who embodied the brand's ethos. not just sponsors, partners. Athletes given resources to push their sport's boundaries, attempt unprecedented feats, and build personal brands aligned with Red Bull's philosophy. Red Bull's athlete program was unique. They didn't just provide equipment and appearance fees. They funded ambitious projects, world record attempts, first descents, expeditions to remote locations. If an athlete had a vision that aligned with Red Bull's brand, resources were made available. Travis Pastrana exemplified this approach. A motocross champion and rally driver, Pastrana pushed boundaries constantly. Red Bull didn't just sponsor him, they enabled his craziest ideas, jumping motorcycles over buildings, rally car racing, base jumping. Every insane stunt was documented, filmed professionally, and distributed through Red Bull's media channels. In skiing and snowboarding, Red Bull athletes pushed the boundaries of mountain sports. Skiing lines previously considered impossible, snowboarding terrain that seemed suicidal. Red Bull provided funding for expeditions, professional film crews, safety support, and global distribution platforms for the resulting content. By the mid-2000s, Red Bull had created something unprecedented, Red Bull Media House. Not a marketing department or sponsorship division, but a full-scale media production company creating feature films, documentaries, digital content, and live event coverage. Red Bull Media House employed hundreds of professional filmmakers, photographers, editors, and producers. The content they created won Emmy Awards, screened at film festivals, and attracted millions of views independent of any direct advertising. This was entertainment that happened to feature Red Bull athletes and events. Films like The Art of Flight, documenting extreme snowboarding, achieved mainstream success, not as advertisements, but as legitimate films that audiences paid to see. Unchained, the untold story of freestyle motocross told the history of FMX through stunning cinematography and authentic storytelling. October 14th, 2012. Roswell, New Mexico. Red Bull was about to attempt something that seemed impossible, sending a human being to the edge of space and having him jump back to Earth. The Red Bull Stratos mission would culminate in Felix Baumgartner free-falling from 128,100 feet over 24 miles high, becoming the first human to break the sound barrier in freefall. This wasn't just a marketing stunt. Stratos was a legitimate scientific mission. Red Bull invested over $50 million, assembled a team of aerospace engineers, physicians, and technical experts, spent 5 years planning, testing, and preparing. The risks were genuine. People had died attempting far less ambitious jumps. The ascent took over 2 hours. Baumgartner sat in a pressurized capsule dangling beneath a massive helium balloon rising through the stratosphere. Outside, the temperature dropped to -70 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure was nearly non-existent. One malfunction, one tear in the pressure suit, meant certain death. At 128,100 feet, Baumgartner opened the capsule door. He stood on the edge. Below him was nothing, just 24 miles of thin atmosphere, and eventually Earth. He saluted, and then he jumped. The freefall lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. During that time, Baumgartner became the first human to break the sound barrier without mechanical assistance. He experienced forces and conditions no human had ever survived. Every second was documented by multiple cameras, on his suit, on the ground, on helicopters. When Baumgartner landed safely, standing on his feet in the New Mexico desert, the world had witnessed something unprecedented. Over 8 million people watched the live stream simultaneously, a YouTube record at the time. The total viewership reached billions across traditional and digital media. Stratos represented the culmination of everything Mateschitz had been building. Red Bull wasn't a beverage company anymore. It was an entertainment company, a media company, a sports organization, and a cultural phenomenon. The drink was simply the financial engine that powered everything else. By the 2010s, Red Bull had created an entire ecosystem of extreme sports events, competitions, and content. Over 500 events annually in over 100 countries. Some were serious competitions with professional athletes. Others were amateur, community-focused, and designed for maximum entertainment rather than athletic excellence. Red Bull Rampage showcased the world's best free-ride mountain bikers descending insane terrain in Utah. Red Bull Air Race brought precision flying to global audiences. Red Bull Crashed Ice created a new sport, ice cross downhill, essentially skiing down a steep ice track on skates. Each event was unique, visual, and perfectly suited for social media sharing. The events were designed for the social media age, visually stunning moments that compelled sharing. Crazy crashes, impossible tricks, beautiful locations. Each event generated millions of social media impressions, exponentially amplifying Red Bull's reach beyond the physical attendance. In big wave surfing, Red Bull athletes pushed the boundaries of what was possible, riding waves over 60 feet tall, surfing locations previously considered unsurfable. Red Bull funded safety teams, jet ski support, helicopter rescue capabilities, enabling athletes to attempt things that would otherwise be impossible. Base jumping became synonymous with Red Bull. The sport, jumping from fixed objects with parachutes, is inherently dangerous. Red Bull athletes didn't just participate, they pioneered new disciplines like wingsuit, flying through narrow mountain gaps, proximity flying past cliffs at over 100 miles per hour. The footage was breathtaking and terrifying. Red Bull's investment fundamentally transformed extreme sports from fringe activities into mainstream entertainment. Sports that were dismissed as juvenile, skateboarding, BMX, snowboarding, became Olympic events. Athletes who couldn't earn livings became millionaires. Red Bull's investment created professional pathways that didn't exist before. When skateboarding and BMX were added to the Olympics, the athletes competing were largely developed through Red Bull's infrastructure, training facilities Red Bull built, competitions Red Bull organized, coaches Red Bull employed. The brand's influence on these sports' legitimization was undeniable. The extreme sports revolution wasn't without cost. Athletes died attempting stunts at Red Bull events. Critics accused the company of encouraging reckless behavior, particularly among young people trying to emulate their sponsored athletes. The ethical questions were genuine and difficult. Red Bull faced lawsuits from injured athletes and their families. Questions about safety protocols, medical support, and whether the company pressured athletes into dangerous stunts. Red Bull maintained they prioritized safety and never forced anyone to attempt anything they weren't comfortable with, but the inherent dangers of extreme sports meant accidents were inevitable. Today, extreme sports are mainstream. X Games airs on major networks. Action sports athletes are household names. Skate parks exist in nearly every city. Millions of young people participate in sports that barely existed professionally 30 years ago. Red Bull's investment fundamentally transformed youth sports culture globally. The Red Bull athlete ecosystem now includes over 600 athletes across dozens of sports, training facilities in multiple countries, full-time coaches, nutritionists, sports psychologists, and media teams. It's a professional infrastructure rivaling Olympic programs, entirely funded by beverage sales. 1997. After a decade of success in Europe, Red Bull was ready for its greatest challenge, the United States of America, the largest beverage market in the world, home to Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, a graveyard for foreign beverage brands that had tried and failed to penetrate American consumer consciousness. The challenges were formidable. American consumers had different taste preferences. The regulatory environment was complex. Each state had different rules. Distribution was controlled by powerful regional networks with long-standing relationships with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and Americans were notoriously skeptical of foreign products, especially expensive ones. Red Bull's American launch began in California, specifically targeting Santa Monica, Venice Beach, and San Diego. The strategy was identical to Europe. Start with cultural influencers, build grassroots demand, expand systematically. California's health-conscious, trend-setting consumers were the perfect entry point. The now famous Red Bull promotional cars, old vehicles with giant Red Bull cans mounted on top, appeared at California beaches, gyms, and college campuses. Young, attractive promotional staff called Red Bull Wings teams gave away free samples targeting gym-goers, surfers, and students. The gym and fitness crowd were early adopters. Bodybuilders and athletes looking for any performance edge tried Red Bull and noticed genuine effects. Word of mouth in fitness communities spread rapidly. Cracking American distribution networks was brutal. Distributors were locked into relationships with Coke and Pepsi through exclusive contracts and financial incentives. Red Bull had to prove demand existed before distributors would risk their major relationships. Red Bull initially appeared in independent convenience stores, gas stations, and small retailers without exclusive distributor relationships. The placement was often odd, next to beer behind the counter in non-traditional refrigerators. But it was available, and people were buying it. College campuses became Red Bull strongholds. The product was perfect for all-nighter study sessions. Students became evangelists, telling friends, creating demand that retailers couldn't ignore. By 1998, Red Bull was in hundreds of California retailers. The clubbing scene provided Red Bull's second American beachhead. Mixing Red Bull with vodka became trendy in Los Angeles nightclubs. The Red Bull vodka gave clubgoers energy to dance for hours while drinking alcohol, a combination that became controversially popular. The alcohol mixing strategy, controversial but effective, drove massive consumption growth. Bars that stocked Red Bull saw increased sales. Bars without it lost customers to competitors. The market demand forced broader distribution. Red Bull faced regulatory scrutiny in America just as it had in Europe. The FDA examined the caffeine content, taurine, and other ingredients. Some states considered restrictions or bans. Health officials worried about the alcohol mixing phenomenon and caffeine levels. Media coverage was mixed. Some outlets warned about caffeine dangers. Others profiled Red Bull as an innovative foreign brand shaking up American beverage markets. The controversy generated awareness. Millions of Americans heard about Red Bull through news coverage, even if they hadn't tried it yet. Red Bull's extreme sports investments paid dividends in America. Sponsoring American athletes like Travis Pastrana gave the brand authentic American credibility. When American action sports stars endorsed Red Bull, skepticism about it being a foreign product diminished. Travis Pastrana's 2006 double backflip, the first ever landed on a motorcycle, was a Red Bull-sponsored event. The footage went viral, reached millions, and cemented Red Bull's association with pushing boundaries in American extreme sports culture. The economics of Red Bull are extraordinary. The small can size reduces ingredient and shipping costs. The premium pricing commands high margins. The concentrated formula means less liquid to transport. Red Bull's profitability per unit far exceeds traditional beverages. Red Bull manufactures nothing itself. Production is outsourced to just 2 facilities, one in Austria, one in Switzerland. This keeps capital costs low, eliminates manufacturing risk, and allows Red Bull to focus entirely on brand building and distribution. It's an incredibly lean operational model. Distribution partnerships eventually formed with major beverage distributors. By the early 2000s, Red Bull had convinced distributors that carrying their product was profitable enough to justify any relationship risks with Coke or Pepsi. The margins Red Bull offered to distributors and retailers exceeded traditional beverages, creating financial incentives that overcame loyalty to established brands. By 2005, Red Bull had conquered America. Over 1 billion cans sold annually in the United States alone. The brand was ubiquitous, available in over 90% of convenience stores nationwide. American sales exceeded European sales. The final frontier had been conquered. With Europe and America conquered, Red Bull turned its attention to Asia. Ironically, this meant introducing a drink with Asian origins back to Asian markets, but now as a Western premium brand rather than a local tonic. In Thailand, the situation was unique. Krating Deng remained popular with working-class consumers. Red Bull was positioned differently as a premium Western product for affluent cosmopolitan Thais. The same essential formula, radically different branding and positioning, different price points. Remarkably, both succeeded in their respective market segments. Japan's work culture, long hours, intense pressure, limited sleep, made Red Bull functionally useful. The brand resonated with Sala, Japanese salarymen known for working 60, 70, even 80-hour weeks, adopted Red Bull as a productivity tool. The drink appeared on desks in offices across Tokyo, Osaka, and other major cities. Red Bull wasn't just for nightlife anymore. It was becoming essential to Japan's intense work culture. China presented both enormous opportunity and significant challenges. The largest consumer market in the world, a rising middle class with increasing purchasing power, but also strict regulations, powerful local competitors, and a business environment that favored domestic companies. Red Bull spent years navigating China's regulatory maze, approval for ingredients, manufacturing licenses, import permissions, distribution partnerships. The process was slow, bureaucratic, and required significant local partnerships. But Mateschitz was patient. China was too important to rush. By the late 2000s, Red Bull had established presence in major Chinese cities. The strategy was familiar. Target universities, sponsor extreme sports, infiltrate nightlife, position as a premium Western brand. Chinese youth, eager to embrace global brands, adopted Red Bull enthusiastically. India, with over 1 billion people and a growing economy, represented massive potential. But India was also extraordinarily complex. Diverse regions with different languages, cultures, and consumer preferences. Price sensitivity was extreme, local competition was fierce. Indian entrepreneurs had watched Red Bull's global success and created countless local imitations, priced at a fraction of Red Bull's cost. For many Indian consumers, spending 3 times more for a foreign brand made little sense when local alternatives provided similar functional benefits. Red Bull targeted India's emerging affluent class, college students from wealthy families, young professionals in tech and finance, urban sophisticates who valued Western brands. The strategy was necessarily niche. Red Bull couldn't compete on price, so they competed on prestige and brand cachet. The Middle East, particularly the Gulf states, proved to be an ideal market for Red Bull. High disposable income, young, educated populations, appreciation for Western brands, and climates where energy drinks provided genuine functional benefits. In Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and other Gulf cities, Red Bull positioned itself as a luxury product. Premium placement in high-end stores, sponsorship of Formula One races and extreme sports events, partnership with luxury hotels and exclusive nightclubs. Red Bull became associated with wealth and sophistication. Red Bull also invested in culturally relevant activities, desert racing, camel racing modernization, regional extreme sports. The brand adapted to local culture while maintaining its core identity of adventure and pushing boundaries. Latin America offered another frontier. Brazil, with 200 million people and a growing economy. Mexico, with proximity to the United States and strong youth culture. Argentina, Chile, Colombia, markets with young populations and increasing prosperity. Brazil's beach and sports culture aligned perfectly with Red Bull's brand identity, sponsoring football academies, beach volleyball competitions, surfing events, and favela soccer programs gave Red Bull authentic connection to Brazilian culture. Brazil's nightlife culture, some of the most vibrant in the world, embraced Red Bull enthusiastically. The Red Bull vodka became as popular in São Paulo clubs as it had been in Los Angeles and London. The brand became essential to Brazilian youth culture. Africa represented Red Bull's final major expansion. South Africa came first. The continent's wealthiest nation with established retail infrastructure. Red Bull then gradually expanded to Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, and other growing African economies. African markets presented unique challenges: limited infrastructure in many regions, price sensitivity in economies with lower average incomes, distribution difficulties in countries with poor roads and unreliable electricity. But Africa's youth bulge, the youngest population in the world, represented enormous long-term potential. Red Bull invested in African sports development, soccer academies, running clubs, emerging extreme sports communities. The strategy was long-term: build brand loyalty with Africa's youth as their purchasing power grows. By 2020, Red Bull was available in over 30 African countries. Behind Red Bull's global expansion was sophisticated distribution management. The company pioneered data-driven distribution strategies, analyzing sales patterns by location, time, weather, and demographics to optimize inventory placement. By 2015, Red Bull had achieved what seemed impossible: consistent global presence while maintaining premium positioning and high margins. Over 170 countries, billions of cans sold annually, a brand recognized from Nome, Alaska to Cape Town, South Africa. The financial results were staggering. By 2010, Red Bull was generating over $4 billion in annual revenue. By 2020, over $8 billion. Profit margins remained extraordinarily high, 25 to 30%. The company that started with borrowed capital was now worth an estimated $25 billion. Dietrich Mateschitz became one of the wealthiest people in the world. Forbes consistently ranked him among the top 100 richest globally, with personal wealth exceeding $25 billion. From a marketing director who couldn't afford retirement to one of the world's richest individuals in a single lifetime. Chaleo Uvidya, Red Bull's Thai co-founder, became even wealthier than Mateschitz. His family's 51% stake in the global Red Bull empire, combined with 100% ownership of Krating Daeng in Asia, made them one of the wealthiest families in Asia. Chaleo passed away in 2012, leaving his fortune to his heirs, but not before seeing his local Thai tonic become a global phenomenon. Red Bull's global success created intense competition. Monster Energy, launched in 2002, grew rapidly through different strategies: larger cans, lower per-ounce pricing, aggressive youth marketing. By 2020, Monster had captured approximately 39% of US market share, nearly matching Red Bull's 43%. The beverage giants eventually responded aggressively. Coca-Cola purchased a significant stake in Monster Energy in 2015, gaining distribution leverage and marketing muscle. PepsiCo acquired Rockstar Energy in 2020. The category Red Bull created became a battleground for the world's largest beverage companies. The energy drink category continued evolving. Zero sugar options captured health-conscious consumers. Natural energy drinks using green tea and natural caffeine sources attracted wellness-focused demographics. Performance energy drinks with added electrolytes and amino acids targeted athletes. The category fragmented into dozens of sub-segments. Rather than competing on price or product variations, Red Bull intensified its content and experiential marketing investments. More events, more athlete sponsorships, more media production, more extreme sports infrastructure. Competitors could match the drink, but not the ecosystem surrounding it. Rather than competing on price or product variations, Red Bull intensified its content and experiential marketing investments. More events, more athlete sponsorships, more media production, more extreme sports infrastructure. Competitors could match the drink, but not the ecosystem surrounding it. Red Bull's events became increasingly ambitious and sophisticated. Crashed ice expanded to more cities. Cliff diving added more locations. New properties launched. Red Bull Batala freestyle rap competitions, Red Bull BC1 breakdancing championships, Red Bull Culture Clash music competitions. The brand became a platform for talent across dozens of disciplines. From New York to New Delhi, from London to Lagos, Red Bull's pricing remained premium. Adjusted for local purchasing power, Red Bull commanded higher prices than virtually any mass-market beverage. The small can size helped. Psychological research shows consumers focus more on absolute price than per unit cost. A $3 small can seems more affordable than a $4 large can, even if the latter offers better value. Red Bull's global success raised environmental questions. Billions of aluminum cans produced annually. Enormous carbon footprint from global distribution. Ingredient sourcing from multiple continents. The scale of Red Bull's operations created substantial environmental impact. Red Bull responded with sustainability initiatives, commitments to carbon neutrality, increased use of recycled aluminum, sustainable sourcing for ingredients, investment in renewable energy for manufacturing facilities. Critics argued these efforts were insufficient given the company's scale. Red Bull maintained they were industry leaders in sustainability. Red Bull faces the same tension all consumer goods companies face. Their business model depends on selling more product, which inherently creates environmental impact. They've made meaningful sustainability commitments: aluminum recycling, renewable energy, carbon reduction. But fundamentally, the most sustainable option is reduced consumption, which conflicts with business growth. That's the paradox consumer companies must navigate. By 2020, Red Bull had achieved something extraordinary, becoming a truly global brand that transcended cultural boundaries. A teenager in Seoul, a college student in São Paulo, and a professional in London all recognized Red Bull and associated it with energy, adventure, and youth culture. Cultural anthropologists studied Red Bull as a case of globalization, how a single brand could maintain consistent identity across vastly different cultures. The Red Bull lifestyle meant something different in Tokyo than in Texas, but core associations, energy, adventure, pushing limits remained constant. Red Bull's genius was balancing global consistency with local relevance. The brand looked the same everywhere, same logo, same colors, same core messaging, but the execution adapted. Sponsoring football in Brazil, sponsoring cricket in India, sponsoring tech startups in Silicon Valley, sponsoring music festivals in Europe. The brand framework remained constant while the content reflected local passion points. By 2020, the numbers were staggering. Over 170 countries. Nearly 8 billion cans sold annually, over 13,000 employees worldwide, revenue exceeding €7 billion. the largest energy drink company in the world by brand value, even if not by volume in every market. Salzburg, Austria. Red Bull Media House. This isn't a marketing division. It's not a sponsorship department. This is a fully integrated media production company that happens to be owned by an energy drink manufacturer. Over 350 employees. Professional filmmakers, editors, journalists, photographers, and producers. Annual content output rivaling major media companies. Red Bull Media House, officially founded in 2007, though its roots go back years earlier, represented the full realization of Mateschitz's vision. Red Bull wasn't a beverage company that did marketing. It was a media and entertainment company that funded itself through beverage sales. This philosophy, content quality first, brand integration second, defined Red Bull Media House's approach. They weren't making commercials disguised as content. They were making genuine entertainment and journalism that happened to align with Red Bull's brand values. The production values rivaled major Hollywood studios. Red Bull Media House employed Oscar-winning cinematographers, Emmy-winning editors, and award-winning directors. Equipment budgets reached millions of dollars. Safety teams, helicopter pilots, specialized rigging. No expense was spared to capture extraordinary footage. 2011. Red Bull Media House released The Art of Flight, a snowboarding documentary featuring Travis Rice. The film took 2 years to produce. Crews traveled to remote mountains in Alaska, Patagonia, and the Andes. The production budget exceeded $2 million, unheard of for an action sports film. The film premiered in theaters worldwide, not just action sports specialty theaters, mainstream cinemas. Audiences paid full ticket prices. The film grossed millions at the box office. It won multiple film festival awards. Critics called it a masterpiece of action sports cinematography. The Art of Flight was followed by dozens of major productions. The Fourth Phase, another Travis Rice snowboarding epic. Unchained, documenting freestyle motocross history. Where the Trail Ends, about mountain biking. Afterglow, a snowboarding film shot entirely at night. Each production pushed creative boundaries, but Red Bull Media House didn't limit itself to action sports. They produced documentaries about Formula One, music culture, gaming, entrepreneurship, and adventure. The common thread wasn't subject matter. It was the philosophy of pushing boundaries and achieving the extraordinary. 2014. Red Bull launched Red Bull TV, a streaming platform offering thousands of hours of content completely free. No subscription fees, no pay-per-view, just high-quality action sports, music, gaming, and adventure content available on demand globally. Red Bull TV contained live event coverage, athlete profiles, travel shows, music documentaries, and original series. The production quality rivaled major streaming services. The content library grew to over 1,500 hours. And it was all free, supported entirely by Red Bull's beverage business. Red Bull Media House also entered traditional publishing. The Red Bulletin magazine, launched in 2005, featured professional journalism, athlete profiles, adventure stories, and cultural coverage. The magazine reached circulation of over 5 million copies across multiple countries and languages. The The Red Bulletin employed professional journalists who maintained editorial independence. They reported on topics beyond Red Bull's direct involvement. They occasionally published content critical of extreme sports or energy drinks generally. The editorial integrity was genuine. Mateschitz understood that credible journalism required independence. Red Bull's media empire extended into music culture. The Red Bull Music Academy, launched in 1998, brought together emerging electronic music producers, DJs, and artists for intensive workshops with established legends. The Academy traveled globally: Berlin, Tokyo, New York, Cape Town, cultivating music talent and documenting electronic music culture. Red Bull Studios, professional recording facilities in major cities worldwide, offered free studio time to emerging artists. The only requirement: Red Bull could document and potentially release the music through their channels. Hundreds of artists recorded at Red Bull Studios, launching careers and creating content for Red Bull's platforms. Culture clash events brought sound system culture, originating in Jamaican dancehall, to mainstream audiences. Multiple DJ crews and sound systems competed for crowd approval through music selection, special guests, and showmanship. The events attracted tens of thousands, streamed to millions online, and celebrated music culture rarely featured in mainstream media. As gaming and esports exploded, Red Bull Media House recognized the opportunity. They began covering professional gaming with the same production quality they brought to traditional sports. Multi-camera setups, professional commentary, athlete profiles. Gaming tournaments received the full Red Bull treatment. Red Bull organized gaming tournaments like the Red Bull Kumite for fighting games and Red Bull Wololo for Age of Empires. These weren't just brand activations. They were legitimate competitive events that serious gamers respected. The prize pools were substantial. The competition was genuine. The coverage was professional. Red Bull approached esports the same way they approached traditional sports, with genuine respect and substantial investment. They didn't just slap their logo on existing tournaments. They created new competitions, invested in player development, produced professional coverage, and built infrastructure. The gaming community respects Red Bull because the commitment is authentic. Red Bull Media House operates on completely different economics than traditional media companies. Traditional media needs content to directly generate revenue through ads, subscriptions, or box office. Red Bull's content primarily generates brand value, which translates into beverage sales. Let's look at the numbers. Red Bull Media House costs approximately $200 to $300 million annually to operate. That sounds enormous until you realize Red Bull's global beverage business generates over $7 billion in revenue. The media operation costs roughly 3 to 4% of revenue, a reasonable marketing budget by any standard. But the return on that investment far exceeded traditional marketing. Red Bull's content reached billions of people annually. Their YouTube channel became one of the most subscribed brand channels globally. Their events attracted massive live audiences. The cultural cachet and brand loyalty generated was immeasurable. Internal Red Bull studies showed clear correlations between content engagement and beverage purchasing behavior. Consumers who regularly consumed Red Bull content, watching videos, attending events, following athletes, were significantly more likely to choose Red Bull at purchase moments and pay premium prices without resistance. The content created psychological brand equity that traditional advertising couldn't match. The accolades validated Red Bull Media House's quality. Multiple Emmy Awards for sports coverage, Webby Awards for digital content, film festival prizes for documentaries, journalism awards for the Red Bulletin. These weren't Best Brand Content Awards. They were competing against and defeating traditional media companies. Red Bull's success inspired countless imitators. Major brands launched content studios, hired filmmakers, created streaming platforms. Most failed to achieve comparable impact. Why? Because they approached content as marketing rather than as genuine media production. The brand came first, content quality second. Red Bull succeeded because they inverted that priority. This approach, prioritizing brand visibility over content quality, doomed most brand content initiatives. Audiences weren't stupid. They could distinguish between entertainment and advertising. Content that felt like advertising was ignored. Red Bull succeeded because their content was genuinely entertaining first, brand promotion second. Red Bull Media House represented a potential future for corporate media. As traditional advertising became less effective, ad blockers, streaming services without ads, declining television viewership, brands needed new ways to reach audiences. High-quality content that audiences actively sought became the holy grail. Today, Red Bull is ubiquitous. Over 12 billion cans sold annually worldwide, presence in 171 countries, revenue exceeding €9 billion, over 13,000 employees globally. The company that started in Austria with a borrowed formula has become one of the world's most valuable and recognizable brands. Red Bull's headquarters remain in Austria, in Fuschl am See, a small town of barely 4,000 people. This wasn't an accident. Mateschitz deliberately avoided Vienna or other major cities, preferring to build Red Bull's empire from the Austrian countryside, close to the mountains that inspired the brand's adventurous identity. The energy drink category Red Bull created is now worth over $60 billion globally. It's one of the fastest growing beverage segments, with annual growth rates exceeding traditional soft drinks. But the competitive landscape has intensified dramatically. Red Bull's product strategy has evolved cautiously. The original formula remains the flagship, but the company has introduced sugar-free versions, tropical editions, coconut berry varieties, and limited edition flavors. The approach is conservative compared to competitors who release dozens of flavors annually. This conservatism is intentional. Red Bull fears brand dilution. Introducing too many variants could weaken the core brand identity. While Monster offers over 30 different products, Red Bull maintains fewer than 10 globally. The focus remains on the original formula that built the empire. Red Bull has fully embraced digital media. Their YouTube channel has over 12 million subscribers. Instagram following exceeds 15 million. TikTok presence reaches hundreds of millions. Red Bull is among the most followed brands on every major social platform. Red Bull's social media strategy continues their content-first philosophy. They share spectacular moments from their events and athletes. They produce short-form content designed for social platforms. They collaborate with influencers and content creators. The approach generates billions of organic impressions annually, far exceeding what paid advertising could achieve. Red Bull and the energy drink category continue facing health scrutiny. Emergency room visits related to energy drink consumption, concerns about caffeine's effects on young people, questions about mixing with alcohol, regulatory pressure in multiple countries. These controversies persist and intensify. Several countries have implemented restrictions. Norway and Denmark initially banned Red Bull, later reversing the decisions. Some nations restrict sales to minors. Others mandate warning labels. Marketing to children is prohibited in many jurisdictions. The regulatory environment remains challenging and constantly evolving. Red Bull's environmental footprint is substantial, over 12 billion aluminum cans annually, global distribution requiring enormous transportation, ingredient sourcing from multiple continents, water usage in production. The scale creates significant environmental impact. Red Bull has committed to carbon neutrality by 2025. They've increased recycled aluminum usage in cans, invested in renewable energy for production facilities, implemented sustainable sourcing for key ingredients. The company claims to have reduced per-can carbon emissions by over 30% since 2015. October 22, 2022. Dietrich Mateschitz died at age 78 after a long battle with illness. The visionary founder and driving force behind Red Bull's global empire was gone. The question everyone asked, could Red Bull survive without him? Mateschitz left his fortune, estimated at over 25 billion euros, primarily to his son, Mark Mateschitz. The company's management structure was already established with experienced executives running day-to-day operations. But the question remained, would the vision continue without the visionary? Red Bull faces significant future challenges, changing health consciousness among young consumers, growing preference for natural ingredients and functional beverages, regulatory pressure intensifying globally, competition from new categories like cold brew coffee, pre-workout drinks, and adaptogenic beverages. The landscape is shifting. Generational shifts threaten the energy drink category. Generation Z consumers, now entering their prime consumption years, show more health consciousness than previous generations. They prefer transparency in ingredients, natural sources, sustainability, and functional benefits beyond just energy. Traditional energy drinks like Red Bull face perception challenges with these consumers. Red Bull is investing in innovation to address these challenges. Research into natural caffeine sources, exploration of functional ingredients beyond energy, focus, recovery, cognitive enhancement, new product formats beyond cans. The company is adapting while trying to maintain brand identity. Red Bull Organics, a line of organic sodas with natural ingredients, represents one adaptation strategy. The products don't contain caffeine or taurine, targeting health-conscious consumers who want Red Bull's brand identity without the energy drink formula. It's a cautious step toward category diversification. Despite challenges, Red Bull's brand power remains extraordinary. The events continue, the athlete sponsorships expand, the media production intensifies. Red Bull Basement supports entrepreneurship. Red Bull Dance Your Style celebrates hip-hop culture. Red Bull BC1 showcases breakdancing. The brand continues finding new ways to celebrate human achievement and adventure. Red Bull continues cultivating the next generation of athletes, artists, and innovators. Young skateboarders, BMX riders, gamers, musicians. Each generation discovers Red Bull through the brand's genuine support for their passions. This talent pipeline ensures Red Bull remains relevant as cultural trends evolve. Red Bull's leadership envisions continued evolution while maintaining core identity. Expansion into new beverage categories while protecting the flagship brand. Increased digital and streaming investments. Deeper integration of technology. Virtual events, metaverse presence, AI-enhanced content. Sustainability leadership. Continued sports and cultural investments. The vision is ambitious but grounded in the principles Mateschitz established. The future might include virtual Red Bull events in digital worlds, augmented reality experiences at physical competitions, AI-enhanced athlete training, personalized content delivery, sustainable packaging innovations, new product categories addressing emerging consumer needs. The specifics are uncertain, but the direction is clear: continued innovation while honoring the adventurous spirit that defines Red Bull. From a single meeting between an Austrian marketer and a Thai pharmaceutical entrepreneur, an empire emerged. From a strange-tasting tonic for truck drivers, a global phenomenon was born. Red Bull's story is about vision, perseverance, innovation, and the audacity to believe that impossible things could become reality. Let's put Red Bull's achievement in perspective. From zero revenue in 1987 to over €9 billion by 2023. From one country to 171 countries. From one product to a portfolio. From a marketing concept to a media empire employing thousands. From obscurity to one of the world's most recognized brands. That trajectory is extraordinary by any measure. Over 12 billion cans sold annually. Over 600 sponsored athletes across dozens of disciplines, hundreds of events yearly, thousands of hours of produced content, billions of social media engagements. These numbers represent human stories, athletes' dreams realized, extreme sports legitimized, content that inspired millions, moments that became cultural touchstones. Red Bull's legacy extends beyond the company itself. Skateboarding is now an Olympic sport, partially because Red Bull invested when few others would. Snowboarding, BMX, esports, freestyle motocross, entire industries exist and thrive partly because Red Bull provided early infrastructure, legitimacy, and investment. Electronic music culture benefited from Red Bull Music Academy's cultivation of talent and documentation of the scene. Thousands of artists received studio time, mentorship, and platforms they wouldn't have accessed otherwise. Red Bull's cultural investments created opportunities that transcended brand promotion. Business schools worldwide teach Red Bull as a case study in category creation, brand building, and experiential marketing. The lessons are studied, analyzed, and admired, even if they're rarely successfully replicated. At its heart, Red Bull is a human story. Chaleo Yuvidya, growing up in poverty in rural Thailand, building a business serving working-class Thai laborers. Dietrich Mateschitz, a middle-aged marketing executive feeling stuck, discovering something in Bangkok that would change his life and the business world. Two men from completely different worlds finding common ground and building something extraordinary together. Mateschitz could have retired wealthy after Red Bull's European success. He could have sold the company for billions. He could have focused on maximizing profits. Instead, he invested in crazy stunts, impossible sporting events, and content that didn't directly sell products. He funded athletes chasing dreams. He built a media company because he genuinely believed in storytelling. The human impact is visible in the athletes whose careers Red Bull enabled. Travis Pastrana attempting motorcycle stunts that seemed suicidal. Felix Baumgartner jumping from space. Countless skateboarders, snowboarders, and BMX riders who became professionals because Red Bull provided resources and legitimacy. These are human dreams realized, not just marketing campaigns. Any honest assessment must acknowledge the criticisms. Athletes have died attempting Red Bull-sponsored stunts. Health concerns about energy drinks, including Red Bull, are legitimate. The environmental footprint of billions of aluminum cans is substantial. Marketing that targets youth consumption of caffeinated beverages raises ethical questions. Red Bull's story includes these darker elements alongside the triumphs. Red Bull transcended commercial success to become a cultural phenomenon. The brand appears in movies, television shows, and music lyrics. Red Bull gives you wings entered common language. The blue and silver can become instantly recognizable globally. Red Bull achieved what every brand aspires to: cultural ubiquity and genuine relevance. Cultural scholars study Red Bull as a case of successful brand mythology creation. The brand constructed a coherent narrative, energy, adventure, pushing limits, and maintained it across decades, platforms, and cultures. That consistency built brand power that transcends rational product choice. People don't just drink Red Bull for caffeine, they consume the brand identity. For entrepreneurs worldwide, Red Bull's story provides inspiration. Mateschitz was nearly 40 when he founded the company. He had no beverage industry experience. He borrowed the formula. He faced skepticism, rejection, and near bankruptcy. But he persevered with an unconventional vision and succeeded spectacularly. That narrative resonates with anyone building something new. Red Bull's story isn't finished. The company faces challenges: health trends, environmental concerns, intensifying competition, generational shifts. But Red Bull has navigated disruption before. The brand's cultural power, financial resources, and established infrastructure provide competitive advantages. The next chapters remain unwritten. In 1984, Dietrich Mateschitz sat in a Bangkok hotel room, jet-lagged and exhausted, and discovered a drink that changed his life. He saw not just a functional beverage, but a platform for adventure, achievement, and human potential. He built not just a company, but a cultural movement. He didn't just sell energy drinks. He sold the belief that limitations could be transcended, that impossible things could become possible, that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. Today, when someone opens a Red Bull can, they're not just consuming caffeine and taurine. They're participating in a narrative about energy, achievement, and possibility. They're connected to a global community of athletes, artists, and adventurers. They're part of a story that began in Thailand, was reimagined in Austria, and conquered the world. Red Bull's story teaches us that vision matters more than resources, that persistence overcomes obstacles, that creating something new often works better than competing in established categories, that authentic cultural engagement generates more loyalty than traditional advertising, that brands can be built through actions, investments, and genuine support for communities rather than just slogans and commercials, from a Thai tonic to a global empire, from a borrowed formula to a multi-billion-dollar brand, from obscurity to cultural ubiquity. Red Bull gave itself wings, and in the process it gave wings to countless athletes, artists, and adventurers around the world. That's a legacy that extends far beyond any beverage. That's a legacy that changed culture itself.